welcome back to Yerushalmi Maasrot. We are Perek Chamishi Halacha Beis, which is Daf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. Now, you're not allowed to help someone to do an Aveira. Livnei Iver lo siten michshol. Someone who's chashud on an Aveira is not allowed to sell things where there's a chashash that they'll be using it for Isur. So, we've got some halachas in this. Lo yimkar adam es perosav. Do not sell your fruit, even if they're connected to the ground. Mishaba'u la'odas ha'maasros. Once they've reached that stage of taking maasros, do not sell it to someone, to someone who you can't trust. And similarly, someone you can't trust to take maasros. And lo b'shvius, don't sell your fruit during shmita. The mishu chashud ala shvius, someone who's suspect on shmita. V'im bikeru, if there were fruits that had ripened early and their time of maasros had come, but the rest was not yet ripened, you keep the ripened ones, or and you can sell the remainder. Okay. Right. Yeah, they talk about here selling to an adam chashud pears that reach odas maasros. Right. The chiyuv maasros has come, and you can't eat achilas keva. Okay. Lo yimkar adam es tibnai. Do not sell your tevin. It's your straw, but it's your shibolin, your ears that have been threshed. And sometimes, basically, it might be straw, but you've got bits of wheat in there as well. There's gifta, which is sort of the waste of your olives. There's zygov, which is the waste of your grapes. Lemisha ina neman ala maasros, to someone who's not trust on maasros. Lahotzi mehen mashkin, so that the person who buys it will try and produce out of the grapes liquids. And he'll start taking liquids from these, and or he'll start taking the wheat out of the straw. Okay, this oil and this wine coming out of these pips and skin, it's not yet gmar malacha. These garinei chita, the wheat kernels, have not been this mareach. The oil hasn't gone into its vat, so you can't sell these things. It sounds like you can sell them to a chaver. But there are opinions who hold that generally you just can't sell tevel to anyone, even before the Gemar Bishul. And some say these things there's no issur of selling tevel, because at the time of the sale, you can't even see the liquids here. So the issur is only to someone who's not trusted on maasros. Okay. If the purchaser did take out wheat from the straw, or liquids from this olive waste, chayav b'maasros, he does separate maasros, apart from truma. He doesn't have to separate truma. Shahad tayrem, one who takes truma, belibai, he has in mind, in his heart, ala kutaim, and all these extra waste products that are produced as well. So when you take truma on the main amount, whoever's got the main produce, they have in mind for all these extras. V'stadin, and the size of the grain, and the bits of wheat that are in the straw. And so also one who takes truma for his oil, his wine, you think about any other liquids that might be produced from the skins and so on. Therefore, this straw, again, wherever you've sold, as far as truma is concerned, it's already had truma taken. Now we come back to the chiyuv maasros, a fruit that grows in Syria, right? Fruits of Syria, if they grow in, let's say, the land of Israel, then they're chiyuv maasros. If they grow in the Nachri, if it's a Jew's land, chiyuv maasros. In a Nachri's land, they're potter from maasros. So what's the share that the fruit needs to grow in a land of Israel that is obligated in maasros? So lekach stay yerek for Syria. You buy a vegetable field from a nachri in Syria. If these vegetables grew without reaching the maaseh stage, chayav, you have to separate maaseh. Once they've reached that stage of maasros, then potter. Then this was all in a nachri's field, right? So they're potter from maaseh. And the purchaser can wait a bit for the time of their cutting, and whatever grows in his rishus is potter from maaseh. But he has to cut them himself. He's not allowed to hire workers to gather the vegetables for him, right? The Cohen he's allowed to wait for their normal waiting time, their normal cutting time, right? And whatever grows in his rishus is potter from maaseh. Okay. Syria, of course, was the area that was conquered by Dovid HaMelech. It was added onto Eretz Yisrael, but it was kivush yachid. Okay, the Tanaim argue whether that's kivush yachid is like it was in Syria, whether that helps to bring it Kedusha to Eretz Yisrael or not. Even those who hold in Torah, there's no din Eretz Yisrael, but Rabbanon definitely has a din of Eretz Yisrael for some dinim. Okay. Oinus of Maasrot, by the way, is the level when the fruit is Chaim Maasrot. Different fruits have different stages, as we know. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda said, he argues, you're allowed to hire, the last thing we said, you're allowed to hire workers to help you cut the vegetables. Right? He's not worried about the chashash of the Tanna Kama. He's not going to leso. Right? The Tanna Kama, they said that not only the bits, let's say, is in the Nochris Rishus is part of a Maaseh, what carries on growing Rishus Yisrael is part of a Maaseh. Right? It depends when it reached that Einas Maasrot. Okay? Right. Yeah, the Chachamim were worried you'll make a mistake. They'll think, it depends when you cut the fruit, and you'll think that if you acquire them before they reach Einas Maasrot, they're part of a Maaseh. Basically, there's a reason for not having the workers cutting. There should be some sort of noticeability that the P'tur wasn't always said in every situation. Okay, as to when you're going to cut these vegetables. Let's carry on. When do we say if you're buying the vegetables in the field before Einas Maasrot, then you have to take Maaseh? You bought land together with the vegetables. If you didn't buy the land, even though that at the time of the sale, the fruit has not yet reached Einas Maasrot, Potter, you are still potter from Maaseh. So if you didn't buy the land, you are potter. Okay, remember, the Chiyuv Maasrot in Surya is only rabbinical, right? So he holds, look, the Chachamim are Chaim Maasrot with two conditions. You bought the land as well, and not the fruit, and the acquisition before it reached Einas Maasrot. Right? The Tanna Kama argued on Shem Gamliel, they say the Chachamim are Chaim Maasrot even if you didn't buy the land. Anything you buy from a Nachri before Einas Maasrot is Chaim Maaseh. Okay. According to the Tanna Kama, whatever carries on growing is part of Maaseh. We bring another opinion. Rabbi said, even if you acquire the fruits after Einas Maasrot, you have to take Maaseh lefi cheshbon, based on pro rata what has grown since. So you have to take Maaseh on what grew in your domain. So you have to work out how much was there before, how much is there now, and take Maaseh on any improvements that have taken place since the sale. Right, now we said you shouldn't sell your fruit once they've reached Einas Maasrot to someone who's not trustworthy. Keli Masi says in the Mishnah, do not sell your fields which has got fruit to someone who's not believed. Now we bring a brisa where Tana argues on our Mishnah. Shimon allows you to sell the fruits which have reached Einas Maasrot to someone not trustworthy. And even though you're causing that the Cohen and the Levi will lose their gifts, because that you can tell the Cohen or the Levi, I sold my portion in the fruit, I never sold your Maasrot. Say, go to this person and claim your way, claim your truma, claim your Maaseh. Right? I've just sold my portion, now you want a bit, go back to these people. Okay? Some learn that this heter, he's allowing you to sell to someone who's not trustworthy only if it's still mechuba, but not if it's tolush, whether Einas Maasrot has been reached. So some say it depends only if it's still connected to the ground. Right? He actually, Shimon completely argues on our Mishnah. He allows you to sell, some say tolush, some say only if it's mechuba. Okay. Now, if you're selling fruits which have reached Einas Maasrot to someone who's not trustworthy, if you did go and sell to someone who's not trustworthy, you can take Maaseh on what you eat. So the seller has to be mafresh Maaseh from his fruit on the fruit that the buyer is eating. But you don't have to take Maaseh for the fruit that the buyer will sell on to others. You hear that? You take Maaseh for what he eats, what the buyer eats, but not what the buyer sells on. Because we do not have to worry for a second buyer if he doesn't take Maaseh. Now if, let's say, the person bought wheat, and they found wheat in the straw, and he managed to bring out liquids from the oil, from the olives, he doesn't have to take truma. One who buys this should not take truma on the wheat which he finds in the straw or the liquids. If he did take truma, what's the din? Rabbi Rechia Amar, he said Yafa Kocha is good. He was machmir on himself, and what he separated is considered truma. Rabbi Mana Amar, he said Lo Yafa Kocha. No, it's not good. Therefore, Isa truma shu mafrish. He separated truma when he shouldn't have done. Tuv lala maser is considered tevel as far as maser is concerned, like any produce where you only separated truma, and therefore it's considered tevel as far as maser is concerned. Tesefes, right? It's chayav b'maisrus. Normally truma is part of a maisrus, but this tesefes has not got a shem truma. Therefore, it's like any fruit which you separated only truma. Okay. Now we learned our Mishnah. One who takes truma, let's say on a arema, a mound, usually you patter the bits on the sides, what's in the straw. Now the shir of truma shouldn't be less than 1/60th of the produce. So Rav Hanania, Chaver and Rabbanan, the friends of Rabbanan Boy, they asked, what's the deal in the following case? You took truma 1 in 60 on the main mound, and that's enough for truma. But when you start including all the bits on the sides, it's 1 in 61. It's all very well 1 in 60 on the main mound. When you include all the bits in the straw and the wheat inside the straw, it's 1 in 61. So are we going to join those extras? Then it turns out the truma that you separated was 1 in 61, which is less than the required amount which the Chachamim instituted. Are we still going to say in this case that the truma that you separate covers all these extras as well, even though you've ended up not doing the right share? Rabbi Yossi, he said, the answer to this question, surely it's found in our Mishnah. The Mishnah says the wheat that you separate, the person buys it from the teven that he finds wheat, is parted from truma, because the seller has already taken truma. Shahatoren, when a person takes truma on his crop, beliba, he has in mind alakitin on these extra bits. But alastadin and the what's in this on the sides, and Maasrot Daf teven, the wheat in the straw. Klum tzricha ela b'yaser. Now, do I need to tell you any more? The only way it can be required is where there's a shir meruba. Let's say there's more than 60. I mean, if we're talking about where it's exactly 160 on the whole thing, then obviously these are included. I don't need to tell you that these are obviously included. I don't need the Mishnah to tell us. Basically, what do we get from this? It must be a case where even where you're separating is less than 1 in 60. You understand? You're getting 1 in 60 on the main amount, and these extras take it over that, you still patter the wheat, which is found inside the straw. One who buys vegetables in Surya, if you've not reached Onis Maasrot, you're chayav to take Maisa. When they reach Onis Maasrot in the Nachri's hand, then you're pater. Rebbe Omer, he said after that you follow the reckoning. So you got Machlekes Tanakama and Rebbe. A Jew buys from a Nachri in Surya a field which has got fruit, which has reached Onis Maasrot. So according to the Tanakama, all the fruit is pater from Maaseh, including anything that grows in the Jew's domain. According to Rebbe, any extras that grows in the Jew's domain is chayav b'maisa. Now the Gemara brings a brisa as Machlekes Tanaim, the same argument. Tani we learned in a brisa, Sada, a field in Surya, Shevia Shlish Lifnei Goy, which grew a third in the guy's domain, that reached Onis Maasrot, and the Jew acquires the field, and now you have a growth of the crop in his domain. Rabbi Kiva says that bit extra, potter, you don't have to separate Maaseh. You follow the first third, which was in the Nachri's domain. When they said you do have to separate Maaseh on the extra, but the third in the guy's domain is potter. So this produce is a mixture of tebel and chulim. Rabbi Vina, Ula Bar Yishmael, Hashem Rabbi Lazar, Af Chachamim, also the Chachamim who obligated Maaseh, the tesefes that grew in the Jewish domain. But what sort of Maaseh? Leichiv of tesefes ela l'sha'ava. The obligation they put on as far as Maaseh was the type of Maaseh where the first third grew. Whatever year it was when the first third grew, that's the sort of Maaseh they want you to do. So therefore, if it was in the first third, Hayab Sheni, if it was, let's say, there was Maaseh Sheni that year, then this extra also has Sheni, Maaseh Sheni. If, however, a third in the year was Ani, the third grew in the year where there was Maaseh Ani, then obviously, then the Tesefes also has a chiyuv of Maaseh Ani. Tani, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Yodison, Rabbi Yossi Omer. Minayin l'tzvah shevir shlish, lifnei Rosh Hashanah. Now, if produce grew the third before Rosh Hashanah of Shemitah, kain sa'isa b'shvius, you can gather it in Shvius, and it's not a problem. It's not hefka like other fruits of Shvius. So it grew a third. Talmud lema b'asavtas tvasa of Shvius. So from the passage we learn, sometimes you're allowed to gather the crop that grows in the Shvius, basically if it was growing a third in the 6th year. Rabbi Vina ola b'yishmael v'shem Rabbi Lazar. This din is Rabbi Yonasan bar Rabbi Yosi, but she is Rabbi Kiva Abra, Rabbi Kiva's teacher. Kamar Rabbi Kiva Amar, just like he said, a shlish in the Nachri's Rishus, and 2/3 in the Yisrael's Rishus. Acha shlish havrishon at Malek. We follow where it was for the first third, and any tesefes that grows later on in the Jews' domain is potter from Maasrot. Cain, Rabbi Yonis, and Rabbi Yosi Omer, so they said with Tvua, which grew a third in the year 6 and 2/3 in year 7. Acha shlish havrishon at Malek. We follow year 6, the first third, and anything that grows later is Paris of Shishis, Paris of the 6th year. Now, we're questioning now Rabbi Yonis and Rabbi Yosi why he says this is Rabbi Kiva's view. Right? Amar Zira Ravina, Tatin Bilinatan Amrin. You say two things. You seem to contradict yourself. Because here he is telling me that let's say a Jew buys fruit from a Nachri in Syria, right? Even the Chachamim, when they said yes, you should give Masa on the extra based on last year, based on the year where the first third grew. If the first third grew in Masa Sheni year, that extra has to follow to be Masa Sheni. And if the first third grew in Masa Ani, then the extra has to be Masa Ani. So the Chachamim agree that as far as the years from Masa, you follow the first third. But here you're telling me, with Tvua that grew a third in the 6th year, you can have it the following year, that's Rabbi Kiva. But that should be the Chachamim as well. Ask you Rabbi Yonis and Rabbi Yosi, because Rabbi Kiva Rabbi. You said, it's Rabbi Kiva who holds this. It sounds like you're saying it's not the Chachamim. But if the Chachamim agree that always the years you look at Masa based on what it was the first third, so the same thing here. As far as years of Shemitah, we should follow the first third. The Chachamim would say the same thing. So the Chachamim agree, Tvua, which has grown a third during the 6th year, anything that grows afterwards in Shemitah is considered fruit of the 6th year. So why are you telling me, this only fits in with Rabbi Kiva's view? So in order to answer this, we explained differently what Rabbi Lazar meant when he equated the dinner of Yonis and Rabbi Kiva. Why did he say Rabbi Kiva? If you want to fit it in the words of Rabbi Lazar, to ask you, he's telling you Rabbi Yonis and Rabbi Yosi, which is Rabbi Kiva Rabbi. If you want to say, this is like Rabbi Kiva, he's talking about something different. This is what he meant. Kamaj Rabbi Kiva Amar, just like he said, is Svachim min Torah. The issur to have the aftergrowth during the Shemitah is from the Torah. Ken Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yosi Amar, he also says the issur Svachim is min Torah. To have the aftergrowths is forbidden min Torah. Because that which Rabbi Yonasan said, if he grew a third in the 6th year, you can have it in the 7th. He meant that there's no problem of svichim in the 7th year on that, right? That tesefes. Okay, there's no svichim there. And since he learns this from the pasuk, he must hold that normally his svichim is from the Torah, and that is like the view of Rabbi Kiva. So that's what he meant. It's like Rabbi Kiva who holds svichim is min Torah. And what about produce that carries on growing in the 6th year is cut in the 7th? So he said if it brought a third in the 6th year, carried on growing in the 7th, it's like fruit of the 6th year. Now what about Tvua that started growing in the 6th, but it didn't reach a third? It grew less than a third before Shemitah. Then Shvius comes in. That is Asur. But if it was cut in the Shemitah before it reached the third, so if it got cut right at the beginning of Shemitah before it reached the third, then it never had Kedusha Shvius. Okay. Right. Shekva, why? Shekva hayu asavim. Because it was a grass state in the 6th year. It was like cut before it reached the third. So it's not really considered proper crops, it's considered grasses. Therefore, there was no Kedusha Shvius on it. Similarly, Hevia pachas mishlish lifnei shminis. So let's say year 7 it started growing, and it reached less than a third before the 8th year. And then the 8th year comes. And that's when the proper growth takes place. The third growth takes place in the 8th year. Then it gets cut. Muteres mishum svachin. There's no problem with svachin. But if it was cut in the 8th year before it reached the Shlish, Chala Len Kedusha Shvius, then it has Kedusha Shvius, Shekvar Hayu Asavim, it was already considered in this grass state in year 7. So it was cut before it reached the 3rd, so it's not considered Tzvua, it's considered like grasses, and it was already grasses in the Shemitah year. Now, the Gemara brought a Brisa, there's Machlekes Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim, Tzvua that reached the 3rd in the Nachri's Rishus, right? And carried on growing in the Yisrael's Rishus. So we come back to this. Now, first of all, the Gemara talks about the subject we spoke about. We brought Rabbi Lazar, who explained to Chachamim. I think one of the other Amoraim who saved like him, Rabbi Yechon and Shlakish, Tereah and Marin, they both said, now even though the Chachamim hold that anything that grows extra in Yishus Yisrael has to take Maaseh, you don't follow the first third, which was in the Nachri's Rishus. Nevertheless, Ma'adim Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva, they agreed to him, B'sidron Shoshonim, in what year it is as far as Maaseh is concerned. For this matter, everything follows the first third. She'im, if it grew the first third, B'haya B'Sheni, in a year of Maaseh Sheni, then the Tesefes you separate Maaseh Sheni. And if it grew a third in the year where there was Maaseh Ani, then the Tesefes is Maaseh Ani. Now in the Brises we've got Machlokes Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim, that produce that reached a third in the Rishus Nachri in Surya, and Rabbi Yochanan learned the Machlokes is connected with other situations. Rabbi Yochanan, Hefka, when something comes Hefka, the Hegdish, and Surya, so basically produce, that grew a third in a state of Hefka, or Hegdish, or in a guy's domain in Surya, they're all part from Maaseh. And after that, it started growing Bechiyuv, the produce carried on growing in the Jewish person's ownership. So the din in all these cases depends. Machlekes Rabbi Akiva Chachamim. According to Rabbi Akiva, you follow the Shlish Rishon. Any third that grew, Bechiyuv is part of Maaseh. According to the Chachamim, any third that grew later is Chayav Maaseh. Okay? Now, the Chachamim agree to Rabbi Akiva as far as the years. If it's Maaseh Ani year, you do Maaseh Ani, right? So now we have cases where Rabbi Akiva agrees to the Chachamim that anything extra growing is Chayav Maaseh. Amar Shlakish, Maidi Rabbi Akiva la Chachamim. Rabbi Akiva agrees to the Chachamim Bechenet. This is fruit trees. But the stage of growth to cover the fruit is budding of the fruit. The achanota, the first budding of the fruit. The hashrasha, with various pulses, the stage which decides the fruit of the year, what Maaser it is the rooting. So if these fruits of the tree, or the pulses, let's say rooted, b'p'tur, so they grew in a hefka, or in a hekdesh state, or in a nachri's rishus in Surya, and then they carried growing b'chiyuv, the tesefes is chayav maasros, because the main growth took place in a chiyuv situation. Okay, so what we say? We agree, Rabbi Akiva agrees with the hashrasha, let's say, rooting with pulses, that is a stage of chiyuv ma'aser. They started growing b'chiyuv, the tesefes is chayav maasros, the extra bit is chayav maasros, because the main growth took place b'chiyuv. Now, as Machlokes Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim is also in a situation all the way around. If it grows a third when it was chiyuv, and the tesefes was p'tur, okay? Now, let's say something sown in a house is usually potted from maasros. Right? We've discussed that elsewhere. It's brought in Ola. Zara b'churva. If you sow grain in a ruin where there's no roof, and it's chayav maasros, v'hivia shlish, and we grew a third, and then sikek ha'gabov. So you covered it with a roof. It's like a house. It carried on growing. I've asked Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva, that you follow the first third. Then, Tesefes Chayav, the extra, is also Chayav Ma'aser. Al-Zatin Rabbanon, according to the Chachamim, behold, as far as the Chiyuv of P'tur, we don't follow the first third. Tesefes, the extra grew in a house, right? You put a lid on the ruin, right? It's very unusual to grow things in the house, but he says that Tesefes Potter. So he holds the Tesefes is Potter. So what we said, according to Rabbi Akiva, the Tesefes will be Chayav, because you follow the first third, that was outside. And according to the Chachamim, then you're going to be Potter. Zara Babais, if you sowed grain in the house, which is Potter from Maaseh, and it grew a third, then you remove the roof. According to Rabbi Akiva, Tesefes Potter, the extra is Potter. was you follow the first third. Al Zatan Drabanan, Tesefes is Chaim. Now, does Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim argue with Chala as well? After Chala came, Machleges Rabbi Kiva and Chachamim. Is the Machleges Rabbi Kiva and Chachamim shach with Chala? Let's say you got produce which grew a third in a Nachri's Rishus and carried on growing in Yisrael's Rishus and then made a dough out of it. Do we say just like they argue with Maasrot, so they argue with Chala? According to Rabbi Kiva, you'll follow the first third, and the Tesefes that grew in Yisrael is potter from Chala. And according to the Chachamim, the Tesefes that grew is Chayav Chala. So let's see. Ma'at boy Rabbi Kiva. The Gemara says, why are you asking what's Rabbi Kiva's view? Huh? Yeah? Is that right? Is that what yeah? Rabbi Kiva Amar. Rabbi Kiva said, Peres chuzla'ayz shenechzu la'aretz. You got stuff from abroad, you bring it into the land, chayavin b'chala. Even stuff that grew completely abroad is chayav chala. So why I've got a question, what's the din about tvua where it grew a third in a nachri's rishus? So the Gemara concludes, in his Rabbi Kiva Rabbi Lezer yo sat makshi. If you Rabbi Kiva held like Rabbi Lezer, then you'd ask a good question. So according to Rabbi Lezer, produce chuzla'ayz comes into Yisrael, is potter from chala. So if Rabbi Kiva held that, so you can ask, what is his das in a situation where the first third grew b'ptur? Fair enough, and the extra grew b'chiyuv. But since Rabbi Kiva is chayrek on Rabbi Lezer, and he holds that tuas chutz la'aretz that comes to Yisrael is chayav chala, so really there's no reason for the question. Then another question about tuah that grew a third b'ptur. Rabbi Bo Bachir Ba'ikur B'Zira. What about zara? If you planted stuff, but otis she'en a nokuv, a flower pot without a hole, right? It's not Maasrot Minat Torah, and it grew a third. V'nikeh, but then you made a hole, and it carried on growing. In this situation, this is Machlokes Rabbi Kiva and Chachamim. Rabbi Zira said, Ashram Nikah, look, it only had a hole now. The first third was in a whole thing without a hole. And this din is depending on their Machlokes. So according to Rabbi Kiva, you follow the first third. On the extra Tesefes is potter. According to the Chachamim, the Tesefes is Chaim Midoraisa. The Bavli also brings a similar question, but is not answered. The Rambam passes everything follows the first third when it grew to Osishen and Okov. The Rambam's basing it on Agamora. Agamora comes out, it depends. Machlokes Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim, and whenever we brought that they argue Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim, the Rambam passes that Rabbi Kiva. Okay. So when do we say that if you acquired fruit from a nachri in Syria before it reached Einos Maasrot, you have to take Maisa? That's if you bought the land together with the fruit. But if you didn't buy the land, even though at the time of the sale it's not reached Einos Maasrot, you're potter from Masechet. Right, according to the Tanakama, you buy a field of vegetables from a nachri in Syria. If you buy it before Einos Maasrot, so they're in your domain. So when it reached Chiyuv Maasrot, it was yours. Then you have to separate Maasrot. Rav Shimon Gamliel holds that's only if you bought the land as well. So let's see, what is the view of Rav Shimon Gamliel? Amar Rav Avin, ask you to Shimon Gamliel, he holds Geshidas from Gamliel's the Zakeda, like Gamliel, his grandfather. Danin Zaman, Yisrael She'arisim the Goyim b'Surya. Israelim were working fields of Goyim in Syria as sharecroppers, but they get a portion of the produce. Rabbi Lezer Mechai Perisen, Rabbi Lezer obligates their fruit the Maasrot for the Shvius. Maasrot and Shvius from Gamliel Paita. Gamliel parted their fruit from Maasrot and Shvius. Which Gamliel in Syria, if it's a Jew's land, it's Chayav Maasrot and Shvius. But in Shvius. But if the land does not belong to a Jew, like he's a sharecropper of a guy, it's parted from Maasrot and Shvius. And this opinion holds from Shimon Gamliel in our Mishnah. Rabbi says you have to take Masa on all future growths, Lefi Cheshbon, pro rata, based on what's grown in the Jew's domain. And this seems to be going on what the Tana said before him. That was Rav Shimon Gamliel. The Gemara said, no. Rebbe is speaking al Roisha on the first part. He's going on the Tanakama. According to the Tanakama, you buy fruit from a nachri in Syria. If you buy it after Einos Maasrot, what carries on growing in your Rishus is part of a Maaseh. Rebbe is chaynek. He holds your chayav to take Maaseh lefi cheshbon. So you have to take Maaseh on anything that grows in your domain. Yeah, pro rata, based on whatever size it is, you have to take Maaseh. Halacha Gimel. We're talking about here putting water on the wine sediment to get a taste of wine. from these sediments and you make wine. When you have to take Maaseh on this. Hamad Hamed. So you put water on the sediments. Vanasa Maim B'mida. You put in the sediments, whatever, water to its exact measure. And after you filter it, you find the same amount. You put in, let's say, 3 jugs of water, and you take out 3 jugs of water. Parsley, you don't have to take Maaseh on that. You really haven't got any new wine here. There's a bit of water that has a very slight taste. That's not enough that you have to take Maaseh. Rabbi Yehuda obligates in Maaseh. Maaseh Yosamidas, if you find more than that, right, then you should take Maaseh from elsewhere. You can be mafresh even from elsewhere, Tebel, and definitely you can be mafresh from the Tebel itself, Lefi Cheshvan. Based on the chilled wine, it's increased. If it added by 20 milliliters, so you take Truma Maaseh on that 20 milliliters. Now we're talking about Tavua, you find in the mouse holes, and you don't know, did it come from the grain Chaim Maaseh or not? Chore Anamalim Shalanu. So right, Shalanu here means they stayed the night, like Maim Shalanu, right? So you've got holes of the mice, whatever, where the night has gone by, but Tzadar Reba, they stayed the night next to your grain, Hachayeves, which is obligated in Maaseh, so you've not reached Gemar Malacha yet. And you find these things. We don't know, did they take the Gargirim, did they take bits from this bundle, which is Chai B'Maaseh, or from elsewhere, which is not Chai B'Maaseh. Hare'elu Chayovin, you have to say Prei Maaseh, which is Dua, because we know, Shumidava Gomo, that from something which is Gemar Malacha, right, the Rema which is Chai B'Gorim Kolai, they were taking from there all night, not from elsewhere. Shum Ba'al Bechi, Bartel Shel Richba, now these are various types of garlic and onion, Ugrisin Kilkin, various types of beans, right, it's called kilki, okay. Va'adoshim HaMitzres, the Egyptian lentils, Remember he says Ava Krikas. Krikas is a type of cabbage. Some say it's a type of luf. Okay. Rabbi Yossi says Afa Ketanim. Afa Ketanim, yeah, the small ones, small versions, Petrim and Amaishras. Minil Kachem Mikaladim, you can buy it from everyone but Shviz, even someone who's suspect. These things grow in the wild, people don't keep them in their gardens, and the Chazaka is they grow in a Hefka state. Therefore they have no mice obligation.
What are small cabbages?
What are they?
What's their version like?
It's a type of small cabbage. I don't know.
They just grow wild.
Yeah. Ketanim here he says the types of lentils.
Is that because it's Hefka then?
It's Hefka, yeah. Zara Loaf Ha'elyon, you've got the seed of the upper loof. They say here, it's one of the onion family. Zera Kreishin, the other types of seeds of hop, Zera Vasalim, onion seeds. Zera Lefetzonis, so turnips and radishes. Zara Shazrei Negina Shein Nachalin, other garden seeds that are not eaten. Petrim and Amaishris, don't take separate mice. And you can take them from anyone because they've got no kosher shviz. Now, what about things that grow from the gardens of Truma? Sha'afa Pishe VM Truma. Now, even let's say you have a seed where the father of it, which it came from, was Truma, nevertheless, if you planted it and it took sprouts, you're allowed to eat the growths for Israel. There's no shame Truma. Even though we don't glule Truma is like Truma, that's where the zera was sown is fitting to be eaten, right? But not with a seed which is not fitting to be eaten. So Rabbi Paskin in our Mishnah, as far as that water getting that taste, you found the same measure as what you put in, you don't take Maaseh. Some lines said Shem Relaza, some say Shem Chanina, yes. When do you have to take Maaseh? If it's sort of filtering and fermenting. But if not, Rabbi Yehuda agrees, it's like water, it's positive from Maaseh. Now the one brings a Mishnah, which is Mechalek between a Temed, where it's Hechmetz a bit, it's gone a bit sour, to one that hasn't. Taman Tanina, we learned elsewhere in Cholin, HaTemed, Ad Shalai Hechmetz, before it sort of went sour, it's considered like water. You can't use Kesem Maaseh to buy it. Right, it's like water, you can't use that money to buy this thing. But Pai said it's a mikvah. If 3 log fall in, which doesn't have 40 star, like Maim Shovim, they pass on a mikvah. Mishahachmitz, when it's gone a bit sour, then it's got a din like wine, v'nikach b'kesem maser. And you can buy it with maser sheni money, v'eina posel is no mikveh, and then it would not pass on the mikveh, like wine does not pass on the mikveh. Now, it's Nisa Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is like the Rabbi Yehuda. It's an inner tamad. With that, and b'tamid v'nosan mayim b'mida. You've made this drink and you put water in, and you find the same amount of water. Maser gedei midase potter. You don't have to take maser. Rabbi Yehuda b'chayev. Rabbi Yehuda obligates. Amar Ravo. He says Zimnin Amar Lav sometimes Shem Rabbi Lazar. Zimnin sometimes Amar Lav Shem Rabbi Yisrael Chanina. V'hu shehechmitz. So Rabbi Yehuda is the Tana holds this juice, which is filtered a bit, shehechmitz, it's gone a bit sour of some kind, it's considered wine. You know, according to the Chachamim, even if it's hechmitz, it's still only water. Rabbi Yossi. Now Rabbi Yossi argues, he holds the Mishnah in Chulin is even according to the Chachamim. Rabbi Yossi, Divrei HaKolhi. The Mishnah in Chulin can be everyone. Now even though according to the Chachamim, this temet shehechmitz is not wine, it's water, but they agree you can use maser sheni money for it. You can use salt water, you can buy it with kesef maser, because you can dip your bread in it. And this juice that's gone a bit sour is not worse than salt water, you can dip something in it. So the Chachamim agree that you can acquire it with maser sheni money. Now if you find this juice, if you find a bit more than what you put in, then you're chayv maasros. Ma'u motzi, what's the difference? What are you taking out this temet maasros? How truma loy. But truma you don't have to. Shaterim belibai, one who takes truma on grain, then his intention is alakitin on the other extras, which are not being threshed, for starting the other things on the side, and also anything that's inside the straw. Okay, now we bring a machlokes about the garine tavua that you find in the mice holes. Kamamareach kiryai. If you're smoothing out your pile of your friend, and you haven't told him that you're doing it, and usually that's the gemar malacha, right? That's when the Maasrot obligation begins. Here it was done without the owner's knowledge. Rabbi Yechon and Shlokish, they argue, are you chayiv, is this grain chayiv maser? Rabbi Yechon Amar Nitzval says, yes, got Shem Tevel, chayiv maser. Shem Shlokish Amar, he said, Ulay Nitzval. It does not become Tevel. You can eat it achilas arai. We've learnt in Chala, women gave flour to the baker to make sourdough, right? So to make a yeast, whatever it is. If neither of them has a shir chiv chala, even though the baker joins them all up and makes one massive dough, patura, they are potter from chala. You don't have to separate chala here. Rish Lakish explains, you think you don't have in all of them a shir chala? Surely there is. So why is this dough potter from chala? The reason of the patur is because he made one dough out of all their flour without them knowing. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, just like meruach hatzvor without the owner knowing is chayiv ma'aser, so putting the dough together without the owner's knowing should also be chayiv chala. So Rabbi Yochanan answered back, why the fact that the isa is potter from chala is not because it's done without their knowledge. There's another reason. If you make a dough with the intention to break it up to small doughs which have less than the shiur, paturei min chala. You don't have to separate challah. And this baker, his intention is to take the dough and divide it amongst all the women who have given him the flour. And that's why it's potter from challah. We've learnt in this Mishnah, when he made a sourdough, a baker, and the shir challah, lechalek, to divide later on to small doughs for everyone, chayiv v'challah is chayiv v'challah. So even though it's done in order to divide it up, it's chayiv v'challah. So it must be, the Torah Tama Patur is what we said, because Tziruf is done without the owner's knowledge. But Rabbi Yechon answers back, don't start asking me from Mishnah and Baker. It doesn't depend on him if he divides in the end, and it depends on who buys. Maybe he'll find buyers who'll buy the whole thing in one go. It will become Tevel straight away. Even though his intention is to make it from the dough sour and sell it to many people, it could be he won't divide it in the end. He'll sell it completely to one person. Therefore, his chutzpah miyad chayiv chala. Even in the end, he might end up dividing it. As opposed to the previous case of the women who gave flour to the baker, then definitely he will divide up the doughs, and therefore they are potter from challah. Now Shlokish asked now on Rabbi Yochanan from our Mishnah, Amalei says, V'atani, we've learned in our Mishnah, remember the mouse holes near the, it's ants, okay, ant hills. Next to, there's the bundle is chayav in Masa, Hare'elu chayavin, so the kernels in the holes are chayav Masa. Is mashma, or b'tzad rema, if it's like next to the mound, Petura is part of a Masa, they're not reached Gemar Malacha. If that's the case, Peturin, then the grains should be part of a Masa. Even though there's a Gemar Malacha through the ants, because they gather everything without the shells, nevertheless they're part of a Masa. Must be because the Gemar Malacha was done without the owner knowing about it. So Miruach, which is done without the owner knowing, does not obligate a Maser obligation. Rav Yochanan said, Rav Yochanan says the reason why the Garinim, which are next to this pile, are potter from Maser, although the Gemar Malacha is through the ants, is not because the Gemar Malacha is done without the owner knowing, but it's Mishum Yush, because the owner has no more concern over here. He's given up from what the ants have done. He's made it a hefka, and hefka is potter from Maser. Shmuel bar Rabba, when he says Vaheim, providing Shigiru Rosh Shibolin. It says, the ants nearby, a potter from Maser, that's when they push the heads of the ears, the Garinim, with their chaff, and there's no Gemar Malacha. If they just took these small Garinim away, there'll be Chaim Maser, because then you've got Gemar Malacha through the ants. Even though Gemar Malacha was done without the owner knowing. If the ants do a Gemar Malacha, that also obligates Maser. Masir, Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish, she asked what's Amina, we learned in Chpeah and Chala, Higdishan Achlo Nigmuru, if a person made fruit hektish before Gemar Malacha, and then it goes through Gemar Malacha stage while the treasurer has it. Gemar Nagizba, the hektish treasurer, while he holds on to it, it goes through Gemar Malacha. He did Maruach. And then the original owner goes and redeems it. Peturim is part of from Maaseh, because when the Chiyuv came about, at the time of Gemar Malacha, it was just hektish. And Maruach hektish is part of from Maaseh. So Haray Gizbar Ke'achehu. Now a Gizbar is like a secondary person as far as hektish is concerned. He's not the owner. The owner is the hektish. The Gemar Malacha's Peros is done with a third party, the Gizbar. He's not, as if it's without the knowledge of the owners. Tama, and still you're saying Masha Asa Asoi, that it helps Gemar Malacha, which the Gizbar does, to part of the Peros from Maaseh, because hektish Miruach, and Miruach should help for the Maaseh, even it should create a Tebel status, even though the owner doesn't know about it. Amalei, so he says, Tip, so we can explain it. We could fit in the mission that there is an opinion that says treasurer is like hektish. They are monitoring hektish, they are in charge of hektish, right? And therefore, the Gemar Malacha helps to obligate Maaseh. But not like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi, he said, who Gizba, who Acher, no, the treasurer is someone else, as far as hektish is concerned. He's not considered the owner. And the truth is, good Rabbi Yossi, Ruach doesn't help to pass a Peros from Maaseh because it's done without the owner knowing about it. Now we spoke about the reason of a mission challah with women who give flour to the baker to make a sourdough. He joins up all the flour to make one dough, and yet the dough is potter from challah, even though there's a shear. And they wanted to say the reason of the Torah because it's done without the owner knowing about it. We asked on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says he gave his potter for another reason, because he's going to divide it up into small bits. Rabbi Yochanan, Chavran the Rabbanon, from the Brian Boy, they asked, even if there is in each dough together, if there is in the whole dough, the shir challah, he asked that the dough should be treated if it's not complete, it should be potter from challah. Even though it's all kneaded together, Gemar Malacha, but you're going to make sourdough, and you're going to be putting flour and water to make a new dough, and therefore it's not Gemar Malacha. Is there anything where you're going to put it back to Shloimeh Malachta? It's as if it's Shloimeh Malachta. The Amar of Yosef Shem Zira, and now you're going to prove it, B'Shem Rulaza. This is the din. We drink wine which is not Mu'usa when it's at the vat. If you pour wine from the gas before Gemar Malacha, you've not removed all the pips, whatever, and you pour wine into another keli to drink from it, the wine is not tebel. You're allowed to drink from it arai, without masa. Even though there's no pips in there, it doesn't really need any more malacha. The reason why you're allowed to drink it as tebel, because your intention is to return whatever's left into the keli after you drank what you drank, but it's not reached Gemar Malacha. So the wine in the keli is not Gemar Malacha, it's not no Ma'aseh obligation. And same thing with the dough, which is done to prepare sourdough out of it. Since you're going to go and put it back into something which is learning Gemar Malacha, it's part of Chala. Shum Ba'al Bechi, the types of garlic and onions, Batzah Shel Rizpah, V'Grisim, V'Kirkir, and Adoshim. Reb Meir said the kirkus is part of Maaseh. Now we give a simon for each of these things. Ezel Shum Ba'al Bechi, what is this? I don't know, one row of bits of garlic surrounding this middle stalk. Usually, there are many rows, one within the other. Anything that has only got one shell around all the rows, not like our garlic, which is wrapped from many shells. But what is this type of onion? The stem, the top bit, is sort of bent inwards. He says, you've got no sharpness, as opposed to other onions. Grease and Colin, they're sort of squarish. He said, you'll never get anything that was created square from the 6 days of creation. There's no such thing, no natural thing which is square. So you can't learn the grisin are these meruboim ones. You can't say grisin are square. He says, we've learned, Gufa Shabaheres, the shear of a nega of a baheres which is mitame, kigris hakilkli meruba. The wording there, it's like squared out. It's mafurish that this gris is square. No, the whole thing is telling you that it's not square. If it was square, you would just say gris hakilkli. Everyone knows that it's square. It must be the word meruba is not telling you the size, the shape, the formation of the gris. But lava taninan, why did Mishnah mention meruba? The Cohen has to square out the area of the nega. You have to measure the shear which is required as a square and not as a circle. So that it will be a baheres, a shetach meruba, the shear of the gris, then that the gris can fit in that shape. The Gemara carries on to ask on Rav Shimon Gamliel, there's no such thing created square. We find a plant called naga, which is square. Mulay kitrin is full of knots and bits sticking out. Biva de pillar, some other type of thing which is square. Even though it's square above, and it's circled from below, so it's not properly square. Someone would say, he never said there's nothing square from creation. It's talking about animals. With plants, you do find square ones. So it's not a question, the questions don't start. But Tani came, we learned in a Bryce, Maruba Ba'echel, that which is square in foods, Maruba B'brias, but you don't find it with creatures. Now, what about the times that our Mishnah to part of a Maisa? What are these lentils mentioned in our Mishnah? Their edges are sharp, not like other lentils which are thicker. You don't find any small stones or earth mixed in them. Where a mea pattered. The stems are thin. And the bother of cutting it is a lot. What sort of plant that we have is similar to it, so that we can learn about what this thing looked like. Which type of cabbage, which is like this krikas. We learned in the Mishnah you can buy it from anyone in Shvius. Talking about Svechin in Shvius, if it applies to things which are not food. Rabbi Yirmiyah Bai, he asked, but karkamin that grew in Shemitah, Ma'ashu Mutayim Mishum Svachin. Are they karkamin? How do they translate karkamin? Saffron crocus. Ma'ashu Mutayim Mishum Svachin. Is there no problem of Svechin because it's not really a food? Hasib Rabbi Tanachon Bar Yirmiyah says, why you got a question about it? Well, Taninan, we've learnt in the Mishnah in Bechoros, one who is suspect of trees, you cannot buy flax in Shemitah, afilu sorok, even though they've grounded it and carded it, or pishtan lav kisminhu. Now, surely pishtan is like, it's It's like a wood. It's not really fitting to eat. And yet you can't buy it from someone who's suspect on shvius. It must be the reason is we're worried maybe it's fichin. So Issa fichin applies even things which are not food. And same thing with karkarim. Rav Chinna, the Issa to buy pishtan, b'nei zara. Because the seeds which are edible, if we allow you to buy the pishtan from someone who's suspect, you'll buy also the seeds. Rav Mana said, if you're going to tell me the Issa to buy it b'nei zara because of the seeds, what about the Mishnah in Bechoros? Someone who's suspect to sell truma as chulin, you shouldn't buy even water and salt. You're going to tell me mayim and melach that the issue to buy them is bnei zarai because there's a part which is shaykh truma. Lo mishum kanas. Really, it's a kanas. You can't buy anything from a sinner, even a heta thing where there's no chashash shisul. So here with pishtan, the issue to buy from someone who's suspect mishum kanas. It's not because of the seeds. It's because we don't want you to get involved buying anything from him. Menachem bar Mavsima, Achoy, the brother of Dionis and Kippur, b'shem Rav Ami, Pishtan nilkachas mikol adam b'shvis. You can buy Pishtan from anyone. Now this goes against what we said in the Mishnah before. You can't buy Pishtan from someone who's suspect. Hadad Tema, the words of Rav Ami were said, b'sheni yadayim chashad hu imen chashad. You don't know if he's suspect or not. Hadad b'bori shu chashad. If you know he's suspect, also you can't even buy that. Zuga, who was Krive the Ribaba Azav, the relation of Ribaba Azav, the b'shem Ribabo. Bikia, which is a type of vegetable. Nilkachas mikal adam b'shvis. You can buy it from anyone in shvis. It's not eaten normally. It's eaten on dead chak. This vegetable, I don't know if they translate it or not. No. Vetch of some kind. The Brisa doesn't hold this. We learned in the Mishnah. Zera lufa eliyain. Zera creation. Zera certain types of seeds of onions. Zera lefes and snows of turnips. Shazera negina. Other garden seeds, which aren't eaten, can be bought from anyone in Shvius. V'tani Allah, we learnt on that. Zera istis. Zera istis is that dye, isn't it? Wode. Zera kutza. Mada. Zera bikya. Vetch of some kind. Although they're not eaten, you can buy them in Shvita from someone who's chashud, because the Brisa mentions Zera bikaya is mashmahal bikaya. So the bikaya itself, like, you can't buy that. That's not like Rebavo. Then the Gemara answers, Dilma Deloy Tamrat. Maybe the words of Rebavo that you can buy bikaya from anyone were only said at Sheni Yadayim Chashud Ibn Chashud. You don't know if he's suspect or not. If you know he's suspect, also you can't buy it. Zera Lufa Ta'alyon. Kilim Asni, this is the way to read the Mishnah. Zera Hasidyon. It's like an idiotic seed. Shell Luf. So it grows funnily. It's the Luf Hashoite. It's the wild Luf. But one of the normal luf is Chaim Maisa. And truma. But some of these things, although the seeds are truma, that you can still eat them. The things that grow from it, it's mutter to eat for zarim. It hasn't got a shem truma. Chada ita. Yarbuzin de truma gav kipase. One woman, she had the yarbuzin seeds of truma in her hat, within her head. Naflon leginta v'samchon, and they fell from her hat into the garden, and they started growing. And they had a question, does it have it in Truma? Also, the story came from Rabbi Yochanan with Shara. He allowed it, because the seeds of Yabus, they're not really eaten. The Gedulim don't really have a Shem Truma. This is not our Mishnah. It's clear in our Mishnah. We said Zaronim, which are not eaten, Truma, the seeds had a Truma status. These ones can be eaten. But it says, Bavlaya, you Baghdadi. After I revealed for you the earthenware, you found the jewel. After I paskened to allow it, then then you realized and said, V'lav masisi. Or isn't it a Mishnah? Okay, the next Shir B'ezras Hashem will be the Monday after Pesach.